Are we live? It doesn't look like we are live. Hello, my friends. Hello, hello. It is Jill Osborne from the Interstitial Cystitis Network. It is Sunday, September 8th of 2024, and it is time for another live IC support group meeting. I'm going to say that I'm not 100%. Did not sleep well last night. I woke up at 3:30 and I was up until 5:30 and it was just my legs were cramping. It's always something, right? So I'm not 100%, but I'm going to do my best. So my purpose in doing these meetings is to help patients who are struggling with bladder, pelvic pain, pelvic floor muscle pain, understand why they might be struggling and what we can do about it to give them back their quality of life and to give them hopefully some healing and a cure, right? I don't want anybody telling you that you're damaged goods. I don't want anybody telling you that it's all in your head. I don't want anybody telling you that there is no hope. That is absolutely not true. There is hope. We've learned a lot about. Hello, Bonnie. Nice to see you, hon. We've learned a lot about interstitial cystitis in the last 5 or 10 years. We've now come to believe and understand that a lot of our old beliefs that this was an incurable bladder disease is incorrect. And now we know that now we know why research failed. Now we know why so many treatments were unsuccessful. And that is because interstitial cystitis is not a one-size-fits-all condition. There are groups. But anyway, before we go there, when I normally do these meetings, I usually do a little 30-minute intro, and then I will take your questions for as long as I can. But we always have to start our meeting with a thank you to our wonderful sponsor, Preleaf. Preleaf is the oldest and most trusted supplement on the market today. It is the #1 supplement recommended by urologists around the world for patients who struggle with interstitial cystitis. It is a medical food for the dietary management of interstitial cystitis. And the way it works is by reducing the acid of certain foods. So if you have to go to grandma's house and have spaghetti or lasagna, and you know that normally that acid would flare you, you can take a couple of Preleaf before that meal, and that will help you tolerate that meal and enjoy that time with grandma while you can. So we want to thank Preleaf, DSC Healthcare Solutions, for sponsoring the IC Network and sponsoring life support and sponsoring basically the entire IC movement for the last 30 years. They have been absolutely incredible. Okay, so week 2, IC Awareness Month, my friends. Week 2, IC, ow. Can't stretch too much. Week 2 of IC Awareness Month. Oh, why did I do that? For those of you who don't know, I'm recovering from a double mastectomy, and I just stretched a little too much. Anyway, week 2 of IC Awareness Month. IC Awareness Month is about finding those patients who are suffering in silence at home alone. We've all been there. We have all been up all night crying in pain. We have all faced the blank stares of doctors who didn't know what the hell was wrong with us and how to treat us. We have all suffered with tremendous fear and anxiety over our future. When you're the patient going through this for the first time, and you've never met another IC patient, and you truly believe that you're the only one, and you have no idea what to do next, this is a dire time. It is a stressful time. It is a scary time to be diagnosed with pain, or to have pain. Actually, let me take that back. To struggle with pain, but not have a correct diagnosis. Or even if you do have a diagnosis, it's like, what now? So I want to find those patients who think that there's no hope. I want to find those patients who are suffering in silence. I want to find those patients who are stuck at home. I want to find those patients who believe that there's no future for them, because there is. because now we know what to do. Now we have a very clear understanding of what interstitial cystitis is. We know how to treat it, and we know how to get patients better. That there are still some patients out there who think there's no hope. The other challenge that we have, gosh, my brain is kind of spinning with a lot of the things that are happening in the IC movement right now. And I'm really kind of focusing it from the perspective of the patient. I'm working with a patient right now who is younger and who just is completely overwhelmed. Really severe pain. Doing physical therapy, doing bladder installations. They are doing everything they can to try to get better. But there's a little piece that's missing. And I want to try to say this because I see myself in her. I see myself 30 years ago when my pain was so severe. And I had lost my job and I had lost my boyfriend. And I was depending upon family to help me because I was literally virtually bedbound with pelvic pain. I wasn't fighting for my life. I was letting people walk over me. I was hearing people criticize me. Jill, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you better? I had my boss say to me, you come from damaged goods. Can you believe the audacity of that boss to actually say to me at work one day, you must come from damaged goods? And of course, when you're the patient, you kind of think you're damaged goods. Like, what did I do to deserve this? What's wrong with me? Why? Why has this happened to me? I went through a period of time, actually, while I was in graduate school, where I was actually pretty depressed. Because I was watching everybody else live life while I was at home or going to grad school at night. Couldn't go to grad school in the morning because I was in the bathroom in the morning. And it's not that I had given up, and it's not that she has given up. It's that you just literally don't know what to do next. It's like you're running from doctor to doctor to doctor. It's not that there's not a will to live. There's definitely a will to live. But you just feel so reloaded. Okay. So that's how I felt. And that's how this patient that I'm working with right now feels. And I'm struggling to provide the right support for her. The single moment that turned me around, that got me out of bed and determined to prove them all wrong, was when I had a doctor say to me, you will forever be a burden on your family. This is your life. You will always be in pain. Get used to it. You will forever be a burden on your family. And, I think I'd been sitting because I was at urgent care or the emergency room. It's the emergency room. And I was just like kind of doing this, I kind of bent over and I looked up and went, "What? What? I will forever be a burden on my family? How dare you say that to me? I will prove you wrong, you son of a bitch. I will prove you wrong." That was more powerful than going to the urologist for treatment, because that was when my brain engaged. That was when my mind engaged. And I went home and I started studying. Nobody was going to tell me I was going to be a burden. And I went from being passive to active. I went from being, what's the opposite of determined? Flailing to determined with a laser focus. And you know what? That's what got my brain fully engaged in wanting to get better. Because it's not just about going to the urologist. It's not just about going to the physical therapist. It's about you and I focusing on our inner strength. It's about focusing on our state of mind. It's about focusing on positivity. It's about focusing on where do we want to be in 5 years. Nobody expects you to do giant things in a day. Success isn't built in a day. Home is not built in a day. This is about laying a slow, consistent, solid foundation of skills. This is about every single day doing something that will support your physical health, getting out walking. I haven't done that yet today. I need to do that. Your nutritional health and your psychological health. It means turning off social networking and getting outside and getting into the sun and getting into nature, because our brains and bodies are not wired for all this electronic stimulation. I'm really concerned about it over the long run. And it's about being determined enough to start tracking things. Like, do a voiding diary. Like, literally, how we know if you're getting better if you're not tracking your symptoms? Well, it's all in my head. No, it's not all in your head. You can't remember details. It's so important that we just start getting some baseline data that you can use to try to figure out if you're getting better or not. So what I'm trying to say here is that, and you can tell, like, I'm really struggling to find the right words with this client. Information is power. You have to invest in information. You have to read. You have to write. You have to track. You have to be the leader in your healthcare. With a position of strength and power and determination. This is my life. I want to get better. What can I do to get better? I hope that kind of makes sense. That there comes a time when we go from being passive to active. There comes a time when we go from being the victim to the victor. There comes a time when we go from being unknowledgeable to very knowledgeable. There comes a time when we become a leader instead of a follower. And you have to be the leader in your healthcare. And it begins with your willingness to learn about it, read about it, study it, understand it, track it. Because there is hope. We can get better. But what we don't want to do is waste 20 years treating something that has no chance of success. And for goodness sake, don't rely on somebody on the internet, even me, to tell you what the right treatment is for you, especially, oh my goodness, I got this crazy email from somebody, who had found this crazy herbalist for quote unquote IC. And so she had this list of 20 herbs she was supposed to take. And I said, what do you want to accomplish with this? And she's like, well, that they said I'm supposed to take all these. And I went, who said you're supposed to take all these? Well, they did. Well, who are they? Well, there's just some people online. I'm like, oh, okay. Do they sell them? Oh, yeah, they do sell them. Yeah. It begins with you understanding your body, your diagnosis, learning about it, exploring your treatment options, and going from there. Don't look for a quick fix. It doesn't work. It's called building a foundation over time. Okay, so again, I have to apologize. I did not sleep well last night, so I might be a little addled today. I feel a little funky today. So week 2 IC Awareness Month, this is what I need you to do. I'm requesting that you do it. Would you please share our daily fact along your social media? Would you please share your story on icawareness.org? We're trying to collect stories. Would you be willing to put up a poster on your social networking? We have got to find these patients who are suffering in silence at home alone. We have to. There is hope. All right. So Bonnie says, should we use pre-leaf more than just when needed? No, of course not. You only use pre-leaf before a meal, and only if that meal is going to have acid in it. Hello, Anne. Heather says, what brand of Lactoferrin do you sell in your store? We sell the Lactoferrin that comes from Australia, the best Lactoferrin on the market that I could find. Where did I put it? Here it is. Lactoferrin 95 plus. And this comes from Australia. It's from cows. All right, so this was the best one that I could find. So why is Lactoferrin compelling? Well, just like PEA, palmitoyl ethanolamide 10 years ago, it turned out the Europeans were studying this over-the-counter supplement that turned out to be stunningly good at calming nerves down and reducing pain. That's called PEA, palmitoyl ethanolamide. They did an IC study in 2019 that showed that 87% of IC patients who took it did very, very well on it. And they reported a significant reduction in their pain and discomfort. So 5 years ago, we all went, wow, that's cool. And slowly but surely, we all started incorporating PEA into kind of our daily routines. It's now become a foundation for treatment in Europe, and it's becoming a foundation for the use of supplements in the IC world because it's so good, again, at calming nerves down. Lactoferrin is kind of following that same trajectory. It was the researchers in Europe who were studying lactoferrin first for the use of recurrent UTI. And in 2003, they published a fantastic study which showed that it was very successful at reducing the incidence of infections in patients with legitimate diagnosed recurring urinary tract infections. Lactoferrin has natural antiviral and antibacterial properties. It also improves iron assimilation, regulates the immune system, and promotes healthy gut bacteria. Okay, so last month, they released a lactoferrin IC study that was, again, actually quite stunning because they took 31 patients diagnosed with IC, some with Hunner's lesions, some without Hunner's lesions. These patients in the 6 months prior to trying lactoferrin continue to have consistent IC flares. After the treatment of lactoferrin, 28 out of 31, nothing, no flares, symptoms gone. The 3 others had 1 flare after treatment, just 1. And what was particularly notable about that study was what happened to the appearance of the bladder before versus after lactoferrin treatment, because before treatment, they found some Hunner's lesions and red and irritated bladder tissue. After treatment, many of the Hunner's lesions were gone. And instead of being red, the bladder had returned back to a much lighter, normal color. And so this is the first supplement with early but good significant data showing that it has the potential of reducing Hunner's lesions. And of course, it supports our theory that well, it's not a theory, it's proven in multiple research studies that Hunner's lesions can be caused by active viral infection in the urinary tract, specifically Epstein-Barr or polyoma. And lactoferrin has antiviral properties as well as antibacterial properties. Lactoferrin is found throughout the body in our secretions. It's found in tears. It's found in saliva. It's a critical and normal part of our immune system. Lactoferrin is also the single most important ingredient in colostrum, which you give to a newborn because it gives them some of that innate immune defense properties. And so a lot of the early research focused on the role of lactoferrin in infants and children. A lot of this new research is showing and supporting the role of lactoferrin in adults. And again, this IC study is nothing short of remarkable. Rebecca says, can you take lactoferrin and pee? Absolutely. Neither one of them have any known drug interactions, at least with the PEA. No known drug interactions, virtually nil side effects because PEA is a part of our body's own natural pain processing. Lactoferrin, there were no side effects reported in the IC study, and it was considered to be very, very well tolerated. So I have been talking with the manufacturer of it. They want to do another large study. I'm going to see if I can help them a little bit with that. And we will, the manufacturer in Europe who did the study, this is from Australia. This is what I could get in the IC Network shop for now. I know I'm going to be bringing on another lactoferrin supplement soon. So anyway, Angie said, good to see you. Hope you're feeling okay. Yeah. Long recovery, my friends. It's a long recovery. If you see me doing this, it just feels good. These incisions are just brutal. That's not nice. So it's nice to see you. So nice to see you are well again. I'm getting there. Harley said, Jill, you're an angel. Your empathy, humanity, you're good. Oh, thank you, honey. I try, honey. I really, really do try. Paula says, I want to express my gratitude. Last year, I was struggling with a disease that no one seemed to be able with. I was searching online, joining groups, which only made things worse. I felt like there was no cure for this sudden sickness. I remember calling you, and you asked me about the medication I was taking. I mentioned estradiol, and a year later, I'm 80% back to normal. Yes, I cut out energy drinks. Yes. And now I only treat myself to 1 cup of tea a week. Your support and advice have been invaluable. Just hearing from you that there is treatment and that things can improve gave me hope and helped me get to where I am now. Thank you so much. Cindy said, do you need a prescription for lactoferrin? No, you do not. It's available in the IC Network shop right now. I only got 12 bottles, and 2 have gone out already so far. 2 that I sent out. But my staff may have sent out more, and I will have more coming in. The only drawback to lactoferrin is it's considerably more expensive than PEA. PEA is under $30 a month. Lactoferrin is in the $75 a month range. But the other thing that's so interesting is you look at the treatment protocol. This is important. So this is really, really, really important because their treatment protocol does not require high doses over a long term. This is really kind of a short-term process here. So the treatment protocol used in the IC study was 5 a day for if I remember correctly, a week. Here, I've got it right here. So this is not a, hey, you got to take 4 pills for the rest of your life type of thing. No. So the protocol for this study, and this study is called Lactoferrin in the Treatment of Interstitial Cystitis, a retrospective pilot study. So again, it's an early study, but still it's a meaningful study. So hold on a sec. Okay. So their protocol was 5 capsules for 7 days, 3 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon before meals, and then 2 capsules a day for 30 days, 1 in the morning and 1 in the afternoon before meals, and then 1 capsule a day for 90 days. And you can completely understand that protocol, because what they're trying to do is boost the immune system and trying to, I would say, somewhat aggressively fight any present infection. So again, 5 a day for a week, 2 a day for 30 days, and then 1 a day for the next 3 months. And then evaluate and see what's up. So what else did they say here? So here are the results. Hold on, it's a really long paper. So before use with lactoferrin, the average number of flares were, one patient had 10 flares in 6 months, 3 had 7 to 8 flares, 13 had 5 to 6 flares, 3 had 3 to 4 flares. At the end of the follow-up period, a marked reduction in IC episodes in the whole study sample was observed. In detail, 28 patients did not manifest any IC flares, whereas 3 experienced 1 flare across that time. The other thing that they found was a significant decrease in serum levels of interleukins, which are part of the cytokine inflammatory process. So that's good to see interleukins drop. It was considered safe and it did not induce any side effects. And then here's the important thing. The bladder of patients before treatment showed an inflammatory status represented by tiny vessels and the presence of Hunner's lesions. The Hunner's lesions were observed in women who have bladder diseases such as interstitial cystitis. After treatment, the bladder showed a decrease in inflammation, aka a lighter color, and the Hunner's lesions appeared to have almost completely disappeared. Now, of course, they're saying that more research needs to be done, but it is indeed a fantastic study. So I will keep you posted on that. And in the meantime, I think it would be fascinating if any patients out there want to give it a try and report back and see what you thought. Again, it's an over-the-counter supplement. Okay. Now, the actual topic of what I was going to talk about today was treatment and how treatment has changed. So let's ponder this a moment, shall we? So 10 years ago, everybody was told they had an incurable bladder disease. Everybody was told you need bladder treatments. You might be given Elmeron. You might be given DMSO installations. You would be given a diet and sent on your way. And you know what? You want to get better, so of course you do everything. But the problem is you didn't get better. Why? Because now we very clearly accept and understand that not every IC patient is the same, that we have distinct groups in the IC patient population. And each group has its own treatments. Bladder treatments never worked for me. Never. And I did them all. What worked for me was pelvic floor physical therapy combined with things that would calm my central nervous system down. So, for those patients out there, and I see you every day on the internet going in various forums saying, I've tried this and this and this and this and this, and nothing's worked. You have to stop what you're doing, take a step back, and don't just say, ask what's next. You have to say, what's the underlying cause of my symptoms? Because if bladder therapies are not working, we've missed something. We've missed something. You've missed something. And again, I saw that just recently, I think over on the Reddit IC board, somebody who said they'd done everything. And as I say with patients who call me and talk, we can't talk about treatments until we understand your body. I don't want to hear what treatments you've done. That's pointless at this point in time. I need to try to understand your anatomy, your body, because it's your anatomy that determines what the correct treatment is. So we look for key distinct groups of patients. So the key groups that I see are number one, Hunner's lesions. So Hunner's lesions are visible wounds on the bladder. Hunner's lesions do not respond to typical oral medications, the old Elmerons and things like that. Hunner's lesions need lesion-specific therapy. Cauterization, steroid injection, antivirals if they found a viral infection, and now we have Lactoferrin. So this is exciting. And you know, the number one cause of intense pain over time in the typical IC patient is Hunner's lesions that have not been treated correctly. We want to make sure that lesions are treated correctly. Our second group is bladder wall driven, and in this group, we're going to do chemocystitis first. So what is chemocystitis? Well, the bladder, like any other part of the body, can be injured. How is it injured? Through chemical exposures. So if you're drinking a lot of diet soda, if you're drinking a lot of Monster energy drinks or any of those energy drinks, if you're going through chemotherapy, if you're using ketamine, those will all damage the bladder. And the damage gets worse over time. I mean, think about if you had a wound on your hand. If you kept pouring acid on an open wound, it's going to get smaller? No, it's going to get bigger. So for the chemocystitis patient, the single most important thing we need to do is we need to stop the chemical irritation. And that's really hard for somebody who's addicted to coffee or energy drinks or green tea. But the concept of injury is real. The bladder can be injured. Once we stop the irritation, we give the bladder time to heal. And there are some things that you could do. We would normally start with maybe a soothing supplement to just calm things down, like Allopath or Pure to calm the nerves down, or Bladder Builder or Bladder Rest. If that bladder is screaming in pain, then they can do a rescue installation with some heparin and lidocaine to calm things down and give you some immediate relief. But slowly over time, that bladder should heal, unless you go back to pouring acid on it every day. You know, I see it's a bit of a reckoning, you know, because all the bad habits you had when you were younger, yeah, you're older now and you might not be able to enjoy those bad habits anymore. Vesna said, Philip had 8 Ioluril installations, but I would not say there is a big improvement. He just finished 10 hyperbaric treatments. Good. Okay. Let's see how he does with that. Hyperbaric oxygen therapy involves doing kind of is compression the right word? If scuba divers surface too quickly, they get the bends. And so they put them into a pressurized chamber of oxygen, and it kind of forces the oxygen back into the tissues. And so we do have research now which has shown that hyperbaric oxygen therapy is, number one, remarkably helpful for burns. If you have any burns, like Jay Leno, when he burned his face last year or 2 years ago, he did a lot of hyperbaric oxygen and his face looks great now. Well, we now have some research showing that hyperbaric oxygen is actually potentially good for patients with Hunner's lesions as well. Suzanne says, I've taken Sister Protect for 10 years and pre-leaf before coffee to keep the IC at bay. Good. So you're accepting the fact that the coffee is an irritant. You're doing everything you can to modify the irritating effects of the coffee by using the pre-leaf. Excellent. I would just challenge you to lose the coffee altogether for a month and just really truly give your bladder time to heal. Because if you had a wound on your hand, would you pour coffee with pre-leaf on it? And the answer, of course, is no, you wouldn't. I think it's important, if you can, to just back off on the coffee for a week, 4 months, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, and just really give that bladder an opportunity to catch up. Just totally catch up and heal as much as it can. Rebecca says, I believe my problem was caused from soda. I ordered the Piora. Should I take something else too? I totally quit all acid. Well, the Piora is going to calm the nerves down. But if you need something that will be soothing to the bladder wall while it's healing, you could do the Bladder Builders, Cystomend, or Allopath, something like that. But it's not long term. I mean, hopefully 3 to 4 months, 6 months, everything calms down. You can slowly reduce the dose of whatever supplement you're using and see if you even need it. You might not even need it after that period of time. Okay, the second thing we're going to look for in the bladder wall driven group is estrogen atrophy. Estrogen atrophy, because it turns out that the bladder needs estrogen to produce that mucus that protects the bladder wall. So if you're on birth control, if you're on Lupron, if you're just getting a wee bit older, like you know who, you don't have the estrogen anymore, which means you don't have that nice thick coating of mucus that you used to have. And so we call this estrogen atrophy. It means that your bladder's ability to defend itself is compromised. That's why drinks that you enjoyed in your 30s and 40s all of a sudden start hurting in your 50s, because you just literally don't have the defenses that you used to have. And so therapeutically, for patients with estrogen atrophy, and again, it's very easy for your doctor to see it. They can just look at your skin down there. Your vulva's dry and your vagina's dry, so is your urethra and so is your bladder. So from a treatment standpoint, the first thing we want to do is do topical estrogen. Because when you give these dry cells estrogen, they plump up and they produce mucus. But even if you do that, you're never going to have a 20-year-old bladder again. And so these are the patients who would truly benefit from kind of a coating approach. And so these are the patients who are going to do well with bladder builders, bladder estes, the chondroitin-based supplements, heparin lidocaine installations over time. But the problem with that is heparin lidocaine doesn't help the bladder get stronger. It just eases some of the discomfort. What helps the bladder get stronger is still going to be estrogen and chondroitin. Let's see, and there was something else I was going to say, but there. Aloe can be soothing, but again, it's not going to repair tissue. So if you've got that estrogen atrophied bladder, doing something that has a coating effect that can give it a little bit of extra protection, like a chondroitin supplement, or if you happen to be in Canada and Europe, as Vesna said, Ioloril, which is a bladder installation that's a combination of chondroitin and sodium hyaluronate. Those are the things that coat the bladder. Now, our third group is going to be pelvic floor driven. These are 85% of IC patients. And yes, the pelvic floor can cause all the bladder symptoms you feel: frequency, urgency, pressure, pain. You are convinced it's your bladder. Guess what? It's your pelvic floor. For 85% of patients out there, did you hear me? 85% of patients have tight pelvic floor muscles. Pelvic floor muscles are not going to respond to bladder treatments. Pelvic floor muscles need physical therapy. It means we've got to go get those muscles checked with a properly certified pelvic floor physical therapist. It means we've got to do some internal pelvic floor work, because the only way you can reach these muscles is through the vagina, through the rectum. It's not freaky. It's not sexual. It's completely normal. I've had it done many, many times, and it is why I am symptom-free the great majority of time now. And ultimately, we want you to be independent. And so while you've gone to physical therapy 5, 6, 7 times, hopefully they will be giving you exercises that you can do at home, and more important, teach you how to use a wand at home so that you can directly work with these muscles and massage these muscles before they start getting super tight again. I can tell when my muscles are starting to get tight by how I pee. Georgia says pelvic floor muscle means pelvic dysfunction. When I refer to pelvic floor muscles, these are the muscles that become dysfunctional and tight. Okay, so therapeutically for the pelvic floor patient, we're doing internal physical therapy. And this is where something like Peora makes sense, because those tight muscles squeeze nerves, nerves become inflamed. And so doing something which calms nerves down makes total sense. The chondroitin-based supplements don't have a big role in pelvic floor. The nerve calming supplements and the nerve calming treatments do, especially if you have our next group, which is pudendal neuralgia. So pudendal neuralgia are patients who have positional symptoms. They're fine when they stand, but when they sit down, it hurts. When they bend over, it hurts. They might have areas of numbness. They might have pins and needles. They might be struggling with PGAD, which is where you suddenly feel very, very aroused. Like in the middle of the day, driving in the car somewhere, it's like, what? You might even have an orgasm. And it's like, body, what? Why did you do that right now? I had PGAD for probably about 6 weeks, I think my second year. PGAD is caused by muscles so tight they're squeezing nerves. And so therapeutically, the first thing we want to do is try to release. Well, number one, they want to identify which nerve is being squeezed. And that's really based upon the location of your symptoms. Like if you have PGAD, that is probably your pudendal nerve. If you have sciatica, it's probably the sciatic nerve. Then they want to address what's squeezing that nerve, which is usually going to be muscle. So that means some pretty good physical therapy. At the same time, they also want to focus on calming nerves down, because we now have nerves that are very, very irritated. And so they might give you gabapentin, which is an oral medication which calms nerves down. This is where PEA really has a place in calming these nerves down, et cetera, et cetera. Even a topical, Dr. Jerome Weiss, I have to say, where's this book? Where did I put it? So his section on pudendal neuralgia is absolutely fascinating, because he talks a lot about how tight muscles squeeze nerves, and you can see it in the skin. So he does a lot. He did a lot of a diagnostic work around the quality and health of the skin, the nerves on the skin, and the nerves underneath the skin. And when he found nerve sensitivity in the skin, he prescribed a topical lidocaine cream to calm those nerves down. And he even used lidocaine sub-Q underneath the skin to calm the nerves underneath the skin. This is the book of books of books. if there is one book besides my own, which is IC 101, it's not just a bladder disease, which I think is damn good because it was the first book to ever talk about phenotyping, and it's still the only book that talks about it. Now, all the top doctors accept it and acknowledge it. And it's great to see the language we've used for the last few years now being used by the top doctors in the world. So phenotyping is our future. This book is absolutely the best book I have ever read on anything related to muscles and nerves. And this is my go-to, and it's filled with great success stories. All right, let me get a sip of Gatorade here. I'm doing Gatorade because, again, I'm pelvic floor driven. I'm not bladder wall driven. I can tolerate it. Number two, I didn't have a good night last night. So my body's all discombobulated, trying to find its new normal after major surgery. So, okay, Renee says, love your book. Yes. If I can just find the time, I'm going to update it. I've got so many things I want to do. And then, you know, I got to say, I read a story last night of one of the oldest ever students who graduated from medical school. He's 70 years old when he graduated from medical school. And I'm going, God, I'd love to do that. I'm 64. And then I saw a couple of people who got their PhDs at 66 and 68. And I had to stop my PhD because of my IC when I was 30 and it's 32. It's like, oh gosh, there's this part of me that, oh, I want to do that. There's just so much that I want to do right now. It's crazy. Renee says you could. Well, the only problem is, and it happened after menopause. Before menopause, I could work on a problem for hours. Like if I had a little problem on the IC network, because I did the IC network, I custom coded the entire website for many, many years before we switched to WordPress. And so I would spend hours and hours working with little tiny lines of code and all this sort of stuff. And I loved it. I loved writing about IC. I loved researching IC, and I loved that coding. And then all of a sudden a switch turned. And I went from loving it to hating it. And now if I can't find the answer in 15 minutes, it makes me crazy. Whereas before, I could study it for 3 or 4 hours. It'd be a great mystery for me. And so I can feel like my blood pressure rising when I'm confronted with something I can't figure out right away. I don't think medical school is in my future. But I think a doctorate could be in my future if I had the money to do it, if I could justify it. Okay, let's go to our fifth phenotype. Our fifth phenotype is widespread pain. This is 40% of the IC patient population has multiple pain conditions. They've got bladder pain. They might have irritable bowel. They might have vulvodynia. They might have TMJ. They might have migraines. They might have fibromyalgia. If you have 2 or more of these pain conditions, you are in the chronic overlapping pain condition. And I was working with a patient on Friday. She's like, well, I only have really one. And I'm like, okay. And then she goes, oh, I have a little bit of IBS. I'm like, okay, that's 2. And then I always ask patients, okay, do you struggle with anxiety? Yeah. Do you have a wicked sense of smell? Can you smell things that other people can't smell, and the smells drive you crazy? She's like, how did you know that? And I'm like, oh, you wouldn't believe how often this comes up. And it turns out that wicked sense of smell is actually very emblematic of what we now understand chronic overlapping pain conditions to be. And again, these are patients who bladder treatments, I'm not going to say pointless, but they're not going to do the job. They're not going to fix anything, because the widespread pain patient is the patient who has an injury to their central nervous system. So what's the connection between all these pain conditions? The nerves. Now, nobody is saying mental illness in any way, shape, or form. We're talking physicality here. We're talking nerves that have been injured or damaged. So what the research, and this was number one, identified by the Chronic Pain Research Alliance, which got its start 10, 12 years ago. Then the National Institutes of Health confirmed it. They did their own studies. And this is going to sound scary at first, but it's not. And a very, very happy ending. Okay. So, but I didn't talk about it for a couple of years because I didn't understand it. So they started doing studies of the brain. And again, when I first started looking at that, I'm like going, I don't get it. I just don't get why we're looking at the brain. Well, the brain is the command and control center for the central nervous system. And again, this sounds scary, but it's not, and there's a happy ending. So this is what they found. Patients who have widespread pain have a brain that is stuck in fight or flight. There's a structure in the brain called the amygdala. The amygdala only turns on when your brainstem senses a threat in the environment. Oh, by the way, oh my God. For those of you who were here last week and we did that guided relaxation, and what did I use as an example? A fire coming towards you last weekend. What do you think happened 15 minutes after I stopped the meeting? A fire right there. Like, really? Okay. So getting back to widespread pain. Okay. So the brainstem has one job to save your life. The way it saves your life is by monitoring your sensory information. What do you see? What do you hear? What do you smell? What are you tasting? What are you touching? Do you see a fire running for you? Or do you see a kitten? Do you hear sirens or do you hear a song? Do you taste poison or do you taste apple pie? Sensory stimulation. You can't think yourself out of fight or flight. Really, ultimately, it's about sensory information. When your brainstem finds something threatening, it signals, uh-oh, threat oncoming, and it turns the amygdala on in your brain. And the amygdala takes control of your brain. And it is what controls fight or flight. It raises your heart rate, it raises your blood pressure, it tightens your muscles, it prepares you to run or freeze or fight for your life. Okay. But let's use the example of a fire. 2 hours later, the fire was out. The threat was gone. And the fire never got close. It was, I could see it, but it was going the other direction. But it was still PTSD worthy. The threat is gone, and it is that point in time that the amygdala is supposed to turn off. The sympathetic nervous system retakes control of the brain. It lowers your heart rate, it lowers your blood pressure, it relaxes your muscles. Okay, so here's what they found in widespread pain. That wasn't happening. That the brain was literally stuck in fight or flight 24 hours a day. Now, the key question is, do you suffer with anxiety? Yeah. Well, anxiety is a sign that you're in fight or flight. You're in fight or flight. So what the research shows is that for 80% of the children who develop widespread pain, there is a history of a major physical trauma. Breaking a leg, being hit by a car, or multiple traumas, like if they were ice skaters or gymnasts or football players, anything at all like that. It takes 14 days of pain to put the brain into a constant state of fight or flight. And again, injury. We're not talking mental illness at all. Nobody's talking mental illness. We're talking a physical structural injury to nerves. For the other 20%, it's a history of abuse or bullying. And this is something I was thinking about this last night because I have made no secret of the fact that I grew up in this very home where there was a kid who later became a rapist and murderer. And I was attacked in 4th grade. I did not leave my home without fear for 10 years. I'm not lying. The year I went away to college, he raped and murdered my neighbor. And I can tell you right now, it could have been me easily because I was a favorite target. I don't know why. We have our high school reunions, we have our victim reunions. A lot of people were hurt. Boys and girls, men and women were hurt. So think about what that did to my brain. That adverse childhood event. What did that do to my brain? My brain legitimately, correctly sensed that my life was in jeopardy. It was. But it wasn't just one day, one time. It was every day for 10 years. So my brain basically got stuck there. All from an attack when I was in 4th grade. There were multiple attacks, by the way. It wasn't just that one. That was the first one. Thus, I developed frequency urgency in junior high. I developed vulvodynia in high school. I developed IBS in my early 20s. I developed severe anxiety disorder in my 20s. I developed migraines in my 20s. I developed bladder pain for the first time in my early 30s. And you're going, what is wrong with me? What is wrong? This makes no sense. Why is this happening to me? I want to live. I want to be out dating. I want to get married. I want to have babies. I was living in my bathroom. And I will tell you that even though I was in grad school, like I said at the beginning, and I did really well in grad school, I was a straight A student. I was a presidential fellow, which is really rare. I was still terribly depressed and terribly anxious. Terribly. I didn't think I deserved to go out to dinner with my parents, like, for a couple of years. Like, literally, I didn't think I deserved to eat food because I thought it was my fault. Legitimately. I thought I was damaged goods. I thought that I was being punished. I thought that I was, I guess, a bad person because only this could happen to a bad person. I mean, those were legitimate thoughts going through my brain while I was in grad school, getting a master's degree in psychology. Why did it happen? Why did it happen? Now we know why it happened. Adverse childhood events. That's what happens in a brain that's stuck in fight or flight. So, therapeutically, how do we reverse that? And this is the very happy ending. So, the first thing that reversed it for me, and you gotta say, I had a lot of panic attacks and I hated going to the doctor. I still don't like going to the doctor, but I don't panic anymore. But I used to have real legitimate panic attacks going to the doctor or dentist. Okay. Finally, one day, like when I was 33, my first year of IC, I was crying in my backyard an hour before a doctor's appointment, just having a panic attack. I didn't want to go. Of course, I always went. I'd be miserable. And I just went, oh my God, clearly I don't know what to do. I don't know how to handle this anxiety. And I boldly signed up for an anxiety management class at my local hospital that completely changed my life. And I got my brain out of fight or flight completely. And I talked about that in our last meeting. If somebody has a specific question, I can walk you through how to do that. Ultimately, the thing to remember here is that when you're in fight or flight, your brain is trying to protect you. It's trying to keep you home. It's trying to keep you safe. And so when you're given an invitation, hey, Jill, you want to? No. You want to go to a movie? No. I'll have to get up and go to the bathroom. You want to go out to eat? No, I'll have a flare. I said, in fact, I just said no to an invitation yesterday spontaneously, but that's more about the surgery than it is about the IC. I legitimately wanted to do all of those things, but I always said no. Why? Because that was my brain remembering the trauma and trying to keep me safe by keeping me at home. And that's what one of the things this class taught me. The other thing that happens with prolonged periods of anxiety is what we call catastrophic thinking. So we go from, hey, you'll have a flare to it'll be the worst flare of your life and you'll never get better and you'll suffer with pain for the next 20 years. That's an example of a catastrophic thought. Hi, Nicole. And so all of a sudden your imagination runs ragged. It's bonkers the way it happens. And so the other part of this is recognizing that when you're stuck in that negative thought, catastrophic thinking loop, you're just reinforcing fight or flight over and over and over. And we got to nip those negative thoughts in the bud. We got to nip that adrenaline in the bud. And I'm happy. Kelly's having one right now. Are you having a panic attack right now? You are not alone, my friend. Okay, so everybody stop for a moment because you are my sister. Everybody, let's take a couple of deep breaths. Let's go in for 3 and out for 4. Let's do it again. Let's go in for 3. And let's go out for 4. You're having a flare? Okay, one more time. In for 3. Out for 4. Oxygen turns off adrenaline. Every time you have a negative thought, you give yourself a jolt of adrenaline that amps everything up. And you don't just have one negative thought a day, you have 100 a day. That's 100 jolts of adrenaline. That's what's driving all the catastrophic thinking and the panic. All that. It's just all this adrenaline from all these negative thoughts. So the course that I taught was taught by a doctor who developed it. And he said the secret to controlling anxiety is to control the adrenaline. Right now, you're overdosing on adrenaline. You have so much adrenaline going through your body, you just don't even know what's up or down. If we can get the adrenaline down, everything's going to calm down. Your negative thoughts are going to calm down. Your pain's going to get better. And he was absolutely right. And so he taught us a very easy 3-step system. He said, whenever you have a negative thought, the very first thing you do is visualize a stop sign. Just stop it. Stop. Then you take a single deep breath in, out. And that oxygen renders the adrenaline from that negative thought chemically done and over. It's gone. And then you remind yourself it's a thought. It has no power. Oh my God, Jill, you're not God. You can't predict the future. For all you know, tomorrow's going to be one of the best days of your life. It's just your brain guarding you. It's just a thought. It has no power. stop sign, deep breath, minimize the thought. So the teacher said, okay, all we have, and so the enemy here is multiple negative thoughts in a row. That's jolt of adrenaline, jolt of adrenaline, jolt of adrenaline. Now we've got 10 jolts of adrenaline floating through there. We got to nip that sucker in the bud. So he said, do it. Stop sign, deep breath, minimize the thought. Go home, pay attention to your thoughts for a week. Every time you have a negative thought, do it. Stop sign, deep breath, minimize the thought. And I'm like, hey man, I'm open. I'll give it a shot. Had my first negative thought walking out of the classroom. Oh my God, this is stupid. It'll never work. But I did it. Stop sign, deep breath, minimize the thought. That first day I did it at least 100 times. And I was really shocked that most of my negative thoughts were about me. Oh, Jill, you're pathetic. Oh, Jill, what's wrong with you? Oh, Jill, you're such an embarrassment to your family. Those were legitimately my thoughts because I didn't understand. Now I don't have those thoughts anymore. Now I understand it completely. It was never my fault. But back then, that's how I felt. Okay. So again, the first day, at least 100 times. Second day, 50 times. Third day, 20 times. 5 days later, once. And for the first time since fourth grade, when I was physically attacked by a rapist and murderer, for the first time in 20 years, I was calm. And I wasn't scared anymore. Because we had finally gotten fight or flight under control. And I have not had a single panic attack since I've taken that class, and I've only come close once. 30 years. Because I know now that the enemy is multiple negative thoughts. I will have, right now I'm having about one a day, and they're never about me because it's not my fault. I now know I had nothing to do with it, that I am an injury patient just like so many of you. My negative thoughts are now about earthquakes or fires. So at least once a day, I have a negative thought about an earthquake or a fire. One is fine. But if I have two in a row, stop sign, deep breath, minimize thought. I refuse to let the adrenaline build up in my body. 3 in a row, 3 negative thoughts in a row, buckle down, do it 2 or 3 times. And I do my affirmations. I can do all things through my faith, which strengthens me. Every day in every way, my life is getting better. So for the widespread pain phenotype, our therapeutic priority is to calm the central nervous system down. How are we going to do that? We're going to do that with a lot of mind-body medicine techniques. Nobody's saying this is mental illness. All we're saying is we've got an injured, very sensitive nervous system, and we got to calm that central nervous system down because right now it's running a little bit amok. We might do medications that calm nerves down. You can do Pura, which is an over-the-counter supplement. This is what I take. Or you can do gabapentin or medications like gabapentin. And these are all designed to calm nerves down. So you can see how far we've come. When they told me I had an incurable bladder disease, they were wrong. I have a healthy bladder. There's no disease in my bladder at all. What I have is an injured pelvic floor. That's due primarily to an old broken tailbone, combined with an adverse childhood event which injured my nervous system. And I am now symptom-free. There is a happy ending for the great majority of us. I think it's hard though because, and I think that my biggest lesson in the last year, now that we're asking about that, asking about childhood trauma to some of these patients. I mean, that patient with longstanding anxiety, we have to, we're going to ask you about that. And heartbroken and stunned by the stories I'm hearing from patients and what they've gone through. One young woman had a stepmother who horribly abused her. My own cousin was horribly abused by her father, my cousin Joe. God bless her soul. We lost her last year. Um, Understanding the toll that abuse takes, that trauma takes, as that young child gets older and older, and making sure that we take the shame away, making sure that we take the blame away. It's not their fault. They've done nothing wrong, and we can work on it. If you're willing to give it a shot, we can work on it. Don't throw away mindfulness. My first urologist said, I'd like you to go see a psychiatrist to learn about mindfulness. I went, oh, hell no. It's my bladder. I had a master's degree in psych. I didn't think I needed that. I'm like, I'm peeing all night. I'm peeing all night. I want to work with you. I want to work with bladder treatments. I don't want to work with a psychiatrist. Well, he was right. He could see from my history. I couldn't see it at the time. He's like, are we real? If he had said instead, I want you to go see somebody who can teach you how to calm your central nervous system down, I would have been far more receptive. But there's such bias towards the name psychiatrist or psychologist. Ironically, there's that old quote, why do people go into psychology? Well, because they're trying to figure out why they're so messed up. That's why I did. I just wanted to understand it all. All right. Okay, so you guys, we're simulcasting right now. When I'm looking here, I'm looking at Facebook. When I'm looking over here, I'm looking at YouTube. Let's see. Hold on. Does pelvic floor dysfunction affect orgasm pain? For me, if I orgasm, it doesn't hurt right away, but within an hour, it's the worst pain I've ever felt. The pain is at the tip of my urethra and it burns. Donut. So pain after orgasm is going to be associated really with pelvic floor spasms more than anything else. And so the fact that your pain is so that's the first thing we're going to look at is the levator ani muscles are going to contract after orgasm strongly, and the levator ani happen to wrap around the urethra. So that's concept number one is, are we now dealing with a very severe pelvic floor spasm? Then the second thing we want to consider, there are a couple of things. Okay, so when you have a super tight spasm, it squeezes nerves, it squeezes blood vessels, and so that could explain the very severe pain in your urethra, that nerve branch is being squeezed. But we also want to consider, were nerves inflamed, irritated, etc., by something involved with sex, a lubricant, a spermicide, something like that might be sitting on your skin, soaking in, that might eventually cause those nerves to start screaming. I'm going to put my money on a really strong pelvic floor spasm. Also, consider the role of estrogen atrophy, because your urethra is the canary in the coal mine. I'm not sure if you're a man or a woman. Oh no, you're a man. Okay, so we can forget that. So pain at the tip of the penis is usually referred from the bladder or from the pelvic floor. That's a very common symptom in men who struggle with pelvic pain disorders. I am currently sitting on the AUA guidelines committee for male pelvic pain. We're creating brand new guidelines for doctors to use to assess men just like you. And so that referred pain, we're going to really look, number one, at your pelvic floor. We had a study several years ago which showed that 70% of the men who complained of pelvic pain and prostatitis-like symptoms actually had an underlying musculoskeletal problem, like a bad hip. And now we really very clearly recognize that the great majority of men diagnosed with IC or chronic prostatitis are pelvic floor patients. And we have to look for a history of athletic injuries, a history of athletes, careers where you're sitting for long periods of time, sitting in a car, sitting behind a desk. If you've ever had any pelvic traumas, have you ever fallen down the stairs, anything at all like that? And so for men, it's very, very, very important that you have a pelvic floor assessment, and let's find out how healthy those muscles are. Because I'm going to say the great majority of men that I work with, it is always, always a muscle problem that is causing urinary symptoms, but urinary treatments don't work. Physical therapy works. Denise said, I keep getting diverticulitis now. It's giving me so much anxiety. Had a colon resection at 51 from recurring diverticulitis. Now happening again along with IC. I do all the things, low acid diet, etc. Denise, honey, I'm so sorry. I am not a bowel expert in any way, shape, or form. I wish I could give you some advice, but I can't, other than just making sure you have a really good, healthy biome down there, that you're using good probiotics, beneficial bacteria every day, like eating yogurt every day if you can, or every other day. Janelle says, is it true that I can take months of pelvic floor treatment to calm the nerves? I've been in therapy for 3 months and I still get flares. What do you do to calm them? Number one, yes. Absolutely. And Janelle, listen, the question you want to ask that physical therapist, since you've had a good number of treatments now, is, are my muscles responding to therapy, or are they always locking back down into tension? If your muscles are always locking back down into tension, then we've got to step away for a moment from the muscles and ask ourselves what puts pressure on those muscles. And that's usually bones. So why are my left pelvic floor muscles consistently tight all the time? Because my SI joint is too flexible and the muscles are locking down to stabilize the joint. So we want to look at, are we having any hip issues? Are we having any tailbone issues? Are we having any SI joint issues? Are there any knee issues? If you have a bad knee and you're limping, that's going to tilt your pelvis to one side. That's going to cause chronic tension on one side. Do you have scoliosis? If you have scoliosis, your hips can rotate slightly as your spine curves. And most importantly, it's your feet. It's your feet. What Dr. Weiss found was that 95% of his patients who always had muscles locked back down into tension, even after they did physical therapy, that it was how their foot hit the ground. That all that stress is directly reflected back up the legs into the pelvic floor. So if, for example, you have an ankle that rolls inward, what that does is that causes that hip to distend on that side and stretches the muscles on that side. And so again, ask her, are your muscles responding to therapy? If not, why? What's going on with bones? Number two, you have to understand that if this injury happened years ago and your body's compensated for that injury with tight muscles for years, 3 months of therapy probably isn't going to be enough. Might take 6 months. Or more importantly, hopefully the physical therapist will teach you how to use a wand so that you can do your own internal physical therapy, which is what I do now. I've done many sessions of pelvic floor physical therapy, but I don't want to be dependent on a physical therapist if I'm flaring, because sometimes it takes a month or 6 weeks to get in. I don't want to have a flare for a month or 6 weeks. That's why I learned how to use a wand, so that at the first sign of my muscles getting tight, I had the tool to calm it down so it wouldn't get tight longer. Julie says, make sure it's the right kind of yogurt. Most are full of sugars and little probiotics. I agree, Julie. I do Oikos. Kelly, it's very, very nice to meet you, honey. If you ever wanted to talk, feel free to give us a phone call. Our 800 number is right at the top of our website. icnetwork.org. I work with patients every day. No charge. It's okay. Okay. And getting back to Janelle here, what can I do to calm nerves down? Well, again, it's going to be Piora. Would be the very first thing that you would try because it's an over-the-counter supplement with very, very few side effects. And this is what I do to keep my nerves calm. And you can get this right in the IC Network shop. It's $28.95. It happens to be, it has some of the best research behind it in a big IC study showing effectiveness at reducing IC pain and discomfort. And the blessing here is it also happens to be one of our most inexpensive supplements. So it's kind of a no-brainer. No side effects in the IC study. And I personally have experienced no side effects. I think I've only talked to one patient in 3 years who thought she might have had a side effect from it, but she couldn't describe it. Donut says, I do work a desk job for 6 years now. My symptoms started 2 years after. Thanks for your insight. So, Donut, you might want to consider getting a chair cushion. And I have a sit-stand desk. I'm sitting at a sit-stand desk right now. And so when I'm feeling more pain sitting, I'll just raise it up and I'll stand in front of it, and it's not a problem at all. But I think ultimately, my second rule is whenever I'm on the phone, I'm up and moving. I'm pacing, which might be hard in an office environment, but I have a headset. And so I make sure that I am up and about many times a day whenever I'm on the phone, because I know the longer I sit, the more I compress those muscles and nerves. It's a real compression injury. And then third, a chair cushion. Let me get that. Okay. So these are the Sun Cloud pelvic pain supplements. Okay, not supplements, chair cushions. The first one is a U. So the advantage of the U is you can have it in the front or in the back, depending upon where your discomfort is. I personally have never done well with a U, but some patients do it. This just basically, it just sits in my closet right there for demo purposes. The cushion that I absolutely love and that I have used for decades, whenever I'm feeling pain, is this design. Because you can see that each butt cheek is supported, but nothing is pushing up into the urethra, into the prostate, into the vulva, into the vagina, or into the rectum. So this is the cushion that I pull out if, for example, I might have a little bit of hemorrhoid pain or a little bit of urethral pain. And I'm telling you right now, I would not have been able to build the IC network as much as I built it, because it's a ginormous IC website, if I hadn't had this type of cushion to sit on, which I sat on consistently every day for 5 years until I finally got physical therapy, which helped us understand why sitting was so painful. And they also have a newer one, which is a waterproof upholstery. And the cool thing about these are just really professional. I mean, look, you can carry it like this. You can carry it into a meeting. You can carry it to a stadium, to a game. You just can't go wrong with these. One of the things Dr. Weiss says for patients with pudendal nerve entrapment and pudendal neuralgia is you have to pay great attention to what you're sitting on. If you're sitting on anything hard, you're just compressing the muscles and the nerves and you're making it worse. Donut says, I'm going to buy one. So Donut, they're in the IC Network shop under chair cushions. They're the SunCloud travel cushion. I think they're in the high 70s price-wise, but they'll last for a long, long time. We used to sell our own cushions that were made by a factory first back east, and they were half the price, but they only lasted about 6 months before the foam compressed. And we sold those for about $35. So we sold thousands of those, but they didn't have the longevity of the sun clouds. The sun clouds are awesome cushions. So stick with the sun clouds. And our factory closed in COVID and never opened back up. So we can't even get the old cushions that we used to get. Anna's, hold on. Okay, so wait. I've got to go back in time here. Rebecca said, I'm currently taking 20 milligrams of Prozac. Is PEA okay to take with it? I meant to ask earlier. Rebecca, that's a question for your doctor or your pharmacist. I personally have not found or are not aware of any drug interactions with PEA. And in fact, I believe that there was one study that found that PEA accentuated the effects of some meds and made them more effective. But I think you need to do your own research on that. I mean, if you go to the IC Network shop and go to Peora, you can copy and paste the product name, which is palmitoyl ethanolamide, or the scientific name, palmitoyl ethanolamide. Copy and paste that, and then go to Google, go to National Library of Medicine, which is pubmed.gov, and put it in there. And you just need to do palmitoyl ethanolamide drug interactions. I did that a couple months ago. I found no known drug interactions, including papers who said that. But that doesn't mean they haven't found something in the last 2 months. So just check it out. And I would Google palmitoyl. Well, you know what? I'm just going to do it. Let me just do it. Hold on. I'm going to Google palmitoyl ethanolamide and Prozac. Let's just see if anybody's written anything about it. Can you take PEA with antidepressants? Oh wait, that's a different PEA. That's phenylethylamine rather than palmitoyl ethanolamide. So hold on. PEA has shown antidepressant-like effects in animal models of depression. PEA induced rapid antidepressant effects. Okay, hold on a sec. Is this a study that looked at PEA and medications? They were studying it with PEA and citalopram. 54 patients. The PEA group demonstrated significantly greater improvement in depressive symptoms compared to the placebo group. The PEA patients experienced a response rate of greater than or equal to 50% than the placebo group at the end of the trial. And the side effects were not significantly different between the two groups. Okay, so I'm not aware of, I'm not seeing, of course, this is a very, very quick review, any direct studies which have looked at PEA and Prozac. Unless, is citalopram the generic for Prozac? Hold on. I can't remember everything. No, that's Alexa. Okay. So talk to your pharmacist, talk to your doctor, and Google it. Nancy says, I used to have urethral pain, not anymore. Now you have terrible rectal pain. Sitting is excruciating. I've tried several cushions to help with sitting. The donut cushion I use for my urethral pain is not at all helpful. Can you recommend what I can do for rectal pain? So much. So, okay, so Nancy, I too have had intense rectal pain, which I many times thought was hemorrhoids. until I had my pelvic floor physical therapy. And now, whenever I'm feeling rectal pain, I literally touch the muscles around my rectum, like 2 inches away on both sides and my butt cheek. And they're almost always very tight and painful to tender to touch. So I now recognize that my rectal pain is dominantly driven by very, very tight pelvic floor muscles. So the way I treat that rectal pain actually is going to be with an internal wand, working on those muscles, trying to get those muscles released. So concept number one is your rectal pain caused by very tight pelvic floor muscles? But it could also be caused by internal hemorrhoids, external hemorrhoids, or even diverticulitis. I'd love to know what your doctor has said about what they think is causing it. And of course, the cushion for you by far is going to be this cushion, which is going to minimize all trauma to your rectum. This is definitely the cushion to get. And it's the Sun Cloud Travel Cushion. This is the cushion I use when I have rectal pain. Hey guys, I need to go to the bathroom, so let's take a quick 1-minute bathroom break and I'll be right back, okay? All righty then. What do you think? Should I cut my hair? Is it getting too long? I usually grow my hair out for 2 years and then I cut it back up to here and then I let it grow out again. I don't know. It's my act of rebellion right now. Like, I think I've gone through so much physical trauma this year from breast cancer that I'm going to hold on to it. Jenny says, Lactoferrin, is the life extension brand a good one? I have no idea. I know that when I went through Lactoferrin brands, I looked for the highest quality I could find, and it was this one. This comes from Australia. Mandy says, had final interstim surgery Friday. I'm doing great. I'm so thankful for success so far. Congratulations, Mandy. Keep telling us how you're doing. Anna says, do such supplements exist in Europe? We can send some supplements to Europe, but the European Union frowns on supplements from America. So the best thing you could do, honestly, if you want to try some of these supplements, is if you have a friend, even a Facebook friend or a friend online, that you can have it shipped to and then let them send it to you as a gift. That's a way, that's a workaround. But we cannot send most supplements to the European Union. They've been blocking us for a decade now. Mandy said, I'm already signed up for pelvic floor physical therapy in 3 weeks, plus I have wands for in between. Excellent. Renee said, no, I should, you were a hairstylist. Yeah, I shouldn't cut it, huh? I've lost a lot with my 2 surgery. You know, you always lose hair after you have surgery. I've had 2 this year, so I can tell I've lost volume. Jenny, also wondering if the sun cloud or waffle cushion is better for pelvic floor. The waffle cushion, I just punctured mine, so it's in the trash accidentally. I popped it. When I'm having pain in my glute muscles, like in my left glute, in my right glute, the cushion I sit on is the waffle cushion. That's my go-to 90% of the time. The only time I use the travel cushion is if I'm having very distinct rectal pain, urethral pain, clitoral pain, etc. And now it's reversed. Back 20 years ago, it's exactly the opposite. I had urethral and rectal pain every day, terribly, so I had to sit on those cushions all the time. Now it's reversed because my pelvic floor is so much better than it was. I've gotten rid of all that pudendal neuralgia that was causing all of that. So just having both is great. The thing about let me get my waffle cushion, guys. Hold on. Where is it? Is it still in here? No. No, it's already gone out in the trash. The waffle cushion is like 17 inches by 17 inches, and it has holes in it. And it's it's like a plastic vinyl cushion. It's only about this thick, filled with air, but it's perfect because the air moves wherever you're sitting. And so that waffle cushion is phenomenal. Jenny said, would the cloud cushion put stress on a prolapse? I don't think it would, honey. I really don't think it would. If the prolapse is coming out of your vagina, I think it would be literally the best cushion you could possibly sit on because it wouldn't put any pressure pushing up against that prolapse unless you wanted the pressure to put the prolapse back into place. Are you, which, yeah, yikes. Are you using a pessary for that prolapse? Belle says, what's the firmness of the pillow? The pillows that we have or the chair cushions that we have in the IC Network shop are generally the medium cushions. The firm cushions or the extra firm cushions you can get directly from the manufacturer. Belle says, I have coccyx pain and the muscles around it. What firmness would you suggest? Medium. The firm cushions are too firm. That's why we don't sell them. The firm cushions are really for the perfect patient for a firm cushion. Well, there's 2 perfect patients. Number 1 is if somebody's very, very obese and they're just so heavy, their weight will push down any cushion. And so if you're over 250 pounds, you might need the firm cushion. And then concept number 2 is that there are some men, for example, who need to dangle with their prostate pain or their scrotal pain. They can't have anything touching their testicles or their scrotum. And so they have to be lifted as high as possible above the surface. And so they're going to do better with a firm cushion because a medium cushion is going to compress a little bit. So, for example, with this cushion, it's starting out 2 inches. When you sit on it, it's probably going to end up being 1 inch. Um, let me try it. Oh, it's so nice. Oh, it's just so comfortable. I mean, the hard part when you have the travel pillows out of stock on the IC network. Belle, hold on. Let me log in and look. We sell out rapidly. Oh, here, hold on. Wrong computer. Let me use this computer and let me just take a look real quick. Oh. Ugh. Ugh, ugh, ugh. Okay. We have 5 waffle cushions, 17-inch, and you're right, we are out of stock. So I will. We may have them. They may just not have put them back into inventory. So let me pop an email to Heather. Heather works in my order center and sends out the orders. Let me send her a message here. See, I'm now at the time of day where these incisions are just. I had a double mastectomy 2 months ago, so just bear with me here. So annoying. Okay, hold on. Heather, can you check the inventory for the travel cushions and make sure that the inventory is updated and or reorder ASAP, as we just talked about these in my meeting today. Sorry about that. We really try. But the summer has been, a challenging summer because I didn't work for well over a month, and I still have days when I have to stop what I'm doing. Let's go back to YouTube here. Janelle says, do I take that supplement every day? And do you still need to follow the IC diet? I faithfully do my pelvic exercises twice a day. Well, remember, number one, Kegels are not recommended for tight pelvic floor muscles. So don't think that doing Kegels makes a difference. It will actually make it worse. Peora is something that I take every day, but I also when I run out of a bottle, as I just did 3 nights ago, I'll then go without it for a month or two, and the effects are still there. And then once I start feeling my skin getting a little prickly again, that's when I know to go back on it. So I haven't taken Peora the last 3 nights, and I'm fine. So what we call that in science circles, we call that a durable response. Chrissy says, I'm starving. You can barely tolerate any foods. How do I start? Okay, Chrissy. Number one, do you have Hunner's lesions? Because the patients who have the most food sensitivity are patients with Hunner's lesions or Hunner's ulcers. So has anybody told you you have Hunner's lesions or Hunner's ulcers? I need to know that before I can answer that question, okay? Let's go back here. Donut says, I'm going to buy and use one of those then, but I've always used a U, but like you said, it would never really do the job. Yeah, just hold tight. I will make sure we get them. And guys, please buy them from us because that's what helps me keep doing these meetings. Janelle says, your pharmacist is suggesting low dose naltrexone. I'm not, I mean, we have some smaller studies showing low dose naltrexone to be helpful for some patients, but not all patients. I don't remember the details of it or its method of action off the top of my head, but I can look it up for you if you want me to do that. So let's get back to Chrissy. So Chrissy, the number one reason why patients are bladder sensitive is that they have wounds in their bladder, Hunner's lesions. It's an open wound. So if you had a wound on your hand, what would happen if you put lemon juice on it? It would hurt like hell. If you poured soda on it, it would hurt like hell. If you put coffee on it, it would hurt like hell. So the easy rule is avoid the foods that are strongly acidic. So that's all coffee, green tea, black tea, all soda, all energy drinks, orange juice, lemonade, limeade, cranberry. Those all have to go because they're too acidic. And if you pour acid on a wound every day, the wound will never heal. Your job is to create an environment to help your bladder heal. And the way you do that is by backing off on the acid and giving your bladder time to recover. The second type of food you want to look at is foods that are high in salt. What's one of the earliest forms of torture, but rubbing salt into open wounds. And so I wouldn't be doing like salty pretzels or spicy pretzels, things like that. The foods that you should be able to tolerate, you can find a list right on our website, IC Network website, are going to be things like, number one, rice, potatoes, carrot. The vegetable aisle is your friend. So doing some zucchini, some carrots, some pumpkin, broccoli. The only veggie we really want you to stay away from is going to be tomatoes because they're going to be really strongly acidic. So doing a baked potato with some sauteed mushrooms on it. Any fresh meat, just don't put barbecue sauce on it or Worcestershire sauce on it or steak sauce on it. If you want, I get now, Jenny, yeah, that would be, well, hold tight, Jenny, that's a good point. You know what I do now that I'm not feeding my elderly parents and I'm just feeding myself and I'm staying away from salty foods because of the blood pressure I got taking care of my elderly parents, combined with losing high saturated foods. This is what I consistently eat now. I go and I get a roasted chicken at the supermarket, and I can make that chicken last 3 or 4 days. And I will do, I'll make a chicken sandwich. I'll make chicken salad, although I can't do mayonnaise right now. The other night I did slices of chicken sauteed with mushrooms, zucchini, and carrots. And then I'll put that on top of potatoes or rice. Last night I had chicken, baked potato, and corn. Think about the one ingredient foods, because food does not need to be your enemy. It is your friend. The enemies are the foods that are mass marketed and produced and manipulated in laboratories. So you should be able to make a veggie stir fry easy peasy. Carrots, mushrooms, zucchini, pumpkin soup, homemade pumpkin soup, butternut squash. Pick your favorite meat, and you know, a little salt and pepper, you're good to go. We just have to stay away from the super fighty, the super spicy foods. One of the things that you might find helpful is this book. This is one of my books. This is called the IC Chef Cookbook. Isn't she pretty? So the challenge here are fruits, because some of the fruits are certainly more acidic. And so the fruits you generally start with are going to be a low acid apple, like a Gala apple or Fuji apple, blueberries, maybe blackberries. Then and pears. That's why she's holding pears. Pears are very low acid. We have some really good low acid jams and jellies on the IC network, also from Colorado Mountain Jams and Jellies. So in this book, we have our extensive 3-column food list. So we've got usually bladder friendly in one column, try it, foods we're trying, and then foods to avoid. And so this is it's just a great place. So as an example, let's look at almonds. Almonds are fine. Unsalted, organic, raw, roasted, or almond butter. I do almond butter frequently. Okay, foods we're trying, lightly seasoned candied or caramel or covered almonds. Foods to avoid, chocolate covered, heavily seasoned with hot chili flavoring or spices. Under apples, sweet mild apples like Gala, Fuji, Pink Lady. Foods we're trying, red or green, delicious. Apples to avoid, sour or tart apples like Granny Smith apples. Under coffees, I would add something here because right now, usually bladder friendly, we have empty for coffees, but I would put in there Dandy Blend herbal coffee, which has no acid and no caffeine. And then foods we're trying are going to be some of the other herbal coffees. Foods to avoid, traditional coffees that are high in acid. Chrissy, I'm happy to talk with you on the phone if you'd like. Feel free to give me a phone call. This is what happens when I sit at a computer. Usually by 3 or 4 in the afternoon, it's just things start to pull as I still have sutures. Carol said, I had a cystoscopy and was told I have ulcers in my bladder, having them cauterized in October. IC was not mentioned or Hunner's. I'm watching my diet as though it's Hunner's. Well, if you have ulcers in your bladder, then they're all likelihood Hunner's. So this would be, I think, one thing that you could try based upon the research study published last month. This is lactoferrin. And lactoferrin is found throughout the human body in our bodily secretions. It is the most important part of colostrum, the milk that mothers give to babies after they're born, because it boosts the immune system. So a lot of the research with lactoferrin focused on it with children, but more recently, in the last 10 years, they've been studying its effects in adults, and the data is really, really good. Lactoferrin has antibacterial, antifungal properties. And we had a research study published last month that found that 31 patients with a strong history of IC and IC flares took it for 4 months, very specific treatment protocol. After the end of treatment, 28 out of 31 had no symptoms, none, not a single flare. And 3 had 1 flare after treatment, just 1. And many of them were having 6, 7, 8 flares over a period of time. But the most important part of this is, number one, they found lactoferrin reduced interleukins, which are cytokines that are part of the inflammatory process in the bloodstream. So that's very encouraging. And more importantly, that when they looked at the bladder wall of these patients who tried it, their bladders were less red and Hunner's lesions were virtually gone. The language that they used I mean, this is the paper right here. It was published in Biochemistry and Cell Biology. And lactoferrin in the treatment of interstitial cystitis, a retrospective pilot study. But let me read the exact words. All my pages are mixed up. Hold on. They're out of order. Page 10, page 11. They also, last year, this lactoferrin was found to be quite successful at reducing recurring UTI because of its antibacterial and antifungal and antiviral effect. They found that it stimulated rapid wound healing in patients suffering from other conditions. Anyway, I'm going to do a big article on it. I just haven't done it yet because I've been recovering from surgery. All right, where is this? Where is this quote? I read it earlier. Okay, well, I can't find it specifically. Oh, but look, here's a picture. So here's a picture from the study. So here's a Hunner's ulcer. Notice all this red and inflamed tissue. Same bladder after lactoferrin. So I'm excited. I'm very, very excited that we finally have something that we can suggest to patients with lesions in their bladder. Okay, well, anyway, hopefully I will have that article done next week. Also, our IC Optimist magazine. Yes, Renee, we do. I only got 12 bottles of it, but I'll be getting more. We're going to bring in a second brand also. But yes, you can find it in the IC Network shop. It's not in the pull down menu. You have to search for it. And you've got 3 R's. You need to take one of those R's out. Can you break lactoferrin into food? I don't see why not. Although what they did in the study is they had patients take it like an hour before a meal so that the meal wouldn't enhance the digestive breakdown. I don't know how big these pills are, and I don't want to open this bottle. Let's see if it's on their website. Hold on. So this is, oh yeah, oh honey, they have a lactoferrin powder. Go to lactoferrin.co. Lactoferrin.co. And I will order some. They're also finding it helpful for blood pressure. Lactoferrin has been studied for its potential effects on lowering high blood pressure, for boosting the immune system, for gut health support, for iron uptake support, for better oral health because it's been found to help with cavities and periodontal disease and strong bones. So I will antibiotic-free, pesticide-free, non-GMO, gluten-free, etc. I will make sure that we order some powder to have in the IC Network shop too. I'll do that tomorrow. Okay, hold on a sec. Okay, whew, I thought I lost Facebook there for a moment. Carolyn said, finally saw a functional medicine doctor. He said the next gen GNAP, and he did the next gen test. He found enterococcus. I knew I wasn't crazy. Also found mold toxicity, which is causing bladder issues. And we've talked about that. We've actually done articles on that. It turns out that IC symptoms, urinary symptoms, can be the result of black mold in the home, black mold exposure. Loretta says, any thoughts on the FODzyme digestive enzyme? No, I don't have any experience with that. Good. I'm glad you're here. Okay, let's check here. Donna says, how do I know if I'm sensitive to a food? Sometimes I try something new and then I have pain, but for all I know, the pain is stemming from me having anxiety about it hurting. Is there a time span? You know, I just answered this question on one IC discussion board. If you're drinking something like a soda, you can feel that flare within 30 to 45 minutes because that's how long it takes that soda to get broken down in your stomach and be excreted through your kidneys and into your urine. So one of the worst flares of my life was at the movies with my boyfriend at the time and some friends. It's a Harrison Ford movie. And this was before I knew about IC. I hadn't even been diagnosed with IC yet, but I had terrible bladder pain. And I got a 7-Up from the concession area, and it was a fountain 7-Up. It wasn't a can of 7-Up. It's where they literally have the concentrate and they mix it with water. And it was very, very, very strong, very sweet, very acidic. Tasted great until it hit my bladder. And I think in that movie, I was up 3 or 4 times. And like, he's looking at me like, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, it's my bladder. And I drove home sobbing in pain. So that can happen for a really strong, strongly acidic food for people who are bladder sensitive. But for the majority of us, that doesn't happen. For the majority of us, you feel it at night. You feel it at night because the distractions of the day, you know, you might notice you're peeing a little bit more, but you're very distracted by life. And it isn't until you lay down in bed and you try to fall asleep that you start feeling the need to pee. And so I would say you'll know by the next morning if you've eaten something, or by 2 a.m. if you've eaten something that's triggered your bladder. Don't be afraid of food, and you don't need to have anxiety over food. Listen, it's super easy. It's just irritation of your bladder wall from acid. Nothing to get upset about. It's just a learning process of you figuring out what your bladder tolerates or not. I'm not afraid of flares at all. I haven't been afraid of flares for 20 years. Because number one, I know that when I have a flare, and now I know that they're mostly pelvic floor flares. I have the knowledge to know what to do about that flare. And I know that most flares are very, very short term. Okay, I'm squirming. Hold on, I'm squirming. Oh, gotta loosen up the muscles. Okay. So like I won't flare with this Gatorade because my bladder has healed and my muscles have healed. If my muscles get tight for a long period of time, it's going to start affecting my bladder. So I'm very invested in keeping my muscles healthy. Hania says, my doctor saw my bladder bloody and inflamed. Would that also be ulcers? He also didn't mention that. All he did was prescribe Elmeron, and I've not felt a difference. So yes, this is always infuriating to me. Number one, because you need a very clear description of what they found for you to be able to make good decisions about your treatments. If you had a bleeding Hunner's lesion, Hunner's lesions, which again are these wounds in the blood. I've got a file. Let's see here. Hold on. Let me see if I can find it. Where are my pictures? Oh, oops. Stay. Hey, you know you're in a live meeting with me if something falls. Okay, let me show you some pictures of lesions. And unfortunately, they got wet. That does not help. I have to redo all those pictures. Okay. So you want to talk bloody. This is the type of blood you're going to see with a Hunner's lesion. Now, this is inflamed Hunner's lesions with neovascularity without a stellate appearance. So these are just a wound, a bleeding, bloody wound. And when you do a hydrodistension and you have a lesion, the bleeding can be so intense, they call it the waterfall effect, it's like you have a bloody waterfall in your bladder. The other way, okay. The other way that lesions present, this is a really good example of a lesion right here. They call it a stellate appearance, a star-like appearance. So there can be a center with arms of red radiating out of it. So that's a typical Hunner's lesion right there also. And then, ow, stop it. These are Hunner's lesions that are doing better. You can see the redness is diminished. But see, here's that center point again. They might have been treated. Okay, so those are really obviously big bloody wounds. And when you biopsy a Hunner's lesion, you see profound inflammation. There is a biological war happening in the middle of those lesions because inflammation is how your body, ow, sorry. I'm sorry, guys. It's just, stop it. It's just, I'm hitting that point right now where I'm sorry. Just stop it. I have to go put some lidocaine on it. That'll help. Okay. So anyway, so when you biopsy a lesion, massive inflammation, again, biological war. So Now we have a much better indication as to what that war is, because it was researchers in Europe and then our own National Institutes of Health who discovered that some patients with lesions actually have a viral infection in the bladder. And we're now testing antiviral medications. So for those patients who lesions keep coming back, even though they treat them over and over again, it's really a sign that we probably have more of a viral infection going on. And that's hard for some people to grasp because when you think of UTI, you think bacteria, but it's not always bacteria. It can be a fungus or it can be a virus. And Hunner's lesions have been linked to viruses. Now, compare and contrast those big red wounds with this. These are what we call petechial hemorrhages or glomurulations, a lot of little red spots. Now, for many years, they thought this was IC. But now we know that this is what happens when you do a hydrodistension to a bladder. So the finding of petechial hemorrhaging has been thrown out by the American Urology Association as having any usefulness for a diagnosis of IC because it's a byproduct of the test, and you can take a healthy bladder, stretch the bladder, and this happens. The other thing too is when you biopsy these, there's no inflammation. Or little inflammation. You biopsy those big bloody Hunner's lesions, there's massive inflammation. Jenny says, can I take PEA and Lactoferrin together? I keep accidentally leaving the live feed, so I'm sorry. I think you could start with one and then 2 weeks later add the second one, and that way you'll know, you'll have a clue as if you're tolerating the first one well before you take the second one. Let me go get, here guys, I gotta go get the lidocaine for my incision. I'll be right back, because it's talking to me. All right. Ugh. Listen, double mastectomy is not for the faint of heart. If anybody wants to see the incisions, I'm happy to show you. Just ask. They start here, go all the way across to the center of my chest, and they here, and they go all the way across that way. Janelle says, never mind, I don't have lesions. Janelle says, would the new supplement be better than the PEA? Honey, they do completely different things. The PEA calms nerves down. So if you're struggling with neurosensitivity, like drug sensitivity, etc., it's the PEA. The lactoferrin has more of an antibacterial, antifungal effect, along with reducing blood pressure. So so apples and oranges, you cannot compare the two. Renee says, me lately, first UTI in a year. I can only do clean eating. Thank you. I need to hear this. Hanny, I want to get back to you for a moment. Listen, Elmeron has now been linked to severe retinal disease and blindness. Elmeron has a pretty big black box label on it now. It's fallen out of favor tremendously. And so we want to make sure that you're doing the treatment based upon your unique phenotype of IC. So if you're pelvic floor driven, doing a bladder coating makes no sense. You've got Hunner's lesions, we need to treat the lesions separately. If you've got estrogen atrophy, then something like Elmeron makes a little bit more sense. But because it's associated with such severe side effects now, most patients will go with a supplement first that contains chondroitin, like Bladder Builder or Bladder Rest, because they also coat the bladder, but chondroitin is a building block of the bladder wall. So most of those former Elmeron patients have switched over to Bladder Builder or Bladder Rest. We have all those in the IC Network shop. I can show them to you if you want. Bladder Builder. I think the best bladder supplement on the market is Bladder Builder because it has the most mechanisms of action to be helpful. So for patients who are bladder wall driven, this is usually my first go-to. But if you flare with probiotics, we would pass on this and instead suggest Bladder Rest. Bladder Rest is a simpler formula for patients who are more sensitive. And then we've got Cystomend, which is a real gangbuster of a supplement that contains quite a few more ingredients, including D-mannose. So it's kind of hitting every possible pathway it can with respect to calming the bladder down. It's got sodium hyaluronate in it to coat the bladder. It's got chondroitin to coat the bladder. It's got PEA to calm nerves down, D-mannose, etc. But I still think Bladder Builder has the best reviews on Elmeron by far. I mean, on Amazon by far. Sharon's asking, do you know if Elmeron was in DMSO treatments long ago? DMSO, there are 3 distinct types of bladder installations that were at one point in time used. DMSO, the brand name is Rimso 50, is a byproduct of the paper industry. And DMSO was once thought to be a wonder drug because it was discovered back in the 1950s. They were looking for a way to carry transplanted kidneys from one hospital to another for kidney transplant. You couldn't freeze the kidney because the ice crystals would destroy it. They were looking for a solvent that would not affect the kidneys, and they invented DMSO. And so at one point in time, DMSO was considered a literal wonder drug. And so back in the 1960s, they touted it for many, many different medical conditions. All the studies failed but one. The IC study showed modest success. And in fact, I interviewed the guy who invented it and who wrote the FDA paperwork for it when it was approved. The good thing about DMSO is it's a penetrant. You know, the way the bladder protects itself is with a really thick coating of mucus. So getting a medication across the mucosal lining of the bladder is very, very difficult because it pushes water away. So getting something through this hydrophobic barrier, it's very, very challenging. So DMSO does soak into the bladder wall fairly significantly. But it has many, many, many different methods of actions, and they really don't understand what it does in the human body, or in the bladder, depending upon what you look at. It can cause mast cells to all kind of discharge at once, exhausting them. Thus, if you're mast cell driven, you feel better for a period of time until the mast cells recharge. There were 2 studies that were released at the American Urology Association, which were rather alarming with DMSO. What they found was that at the FDA-approved dose of 50%, that it caused irreversible bladder spasm in some people. actually in some bladder tissue. They were animal studies. They were not human studies. And so I was there. I talked to every IC researcher there. I remember it very, very distinctly. I asked them all, will you continue to use DMSO? And what was fascinating is Ray Rackley at the Cleveland Clinic, who was absolutely a national leader in IC at the time, and I think he's still there, stood up and said, we will never use DMSO in our clinic again because we believe it's caused the vast majority of damage to the bladders of patients that eventually needed to have their bladder removed. So he stood up in a meeting at the AUA with all the top IC doctors and said, we believe it's harmful. We will not use it. And I personally talked to almost all the doctors there, and they all said that they would not use it at the 50% dose, but they all agreed that if you added more to it and made what we call a DMSO cocktail, that and what the research showed was that if it was at 25%, it did not cause the muscle to spasm. If it was at 50%, it did. So the general agreement among the room was, if you're going to use DMSO, dilute it massively. But there were some doctors who walked away from it. Elmeron has been used in a bladder installation as well. And in fact, if I remember correctly, they created what was the name of it? It was a compounded formula that combined Elmeron with a few other ingredients, and they were having compounding pharmacies send it. Elmeron is a Band-Aid. It's a coating. So the safest way that you could use Elmeron is in a bladder installation. And we can look up the data. I don't remember what the data was off the top of my head. So if Elmeron is in your formulary, I'd rather take it in a bladder installation than by mouth, because if it's in a bladder installation, it's going in your bladder and then you're peeing it out, and it's not getting to your eyes to any great degree. If you swallow it, on the other hand, it has the potential of getting to your eyes and causing retinal damage. The most popular supplement by far around the world is a rescue installation. That is a heparin lidocaine installation. Got heparin to coat the bladder, lidocaine to numb the nerves in the bladder. So that is the go-to bladder installation now. Kathleen said Parsons added to it. Parsons created the company, I think, that was marketing it. They called it the Parsons Solution. Okay. I want to get it right because I don't want to get it wrong. So hold on. So the Parsons solution of interstitial cystitis. Okay. So the Parsons solution is a patented proprietary sterile solution of heparin and alkalinized lidocaine that is instilled into the bladder to relieve pain and discomfort associated with interstitial cystitis. So, okay, so that's the trademark Parsons solution. So let's see if so here is one study from 2014, but that's not. So the California Stem Cell Center, Dr. Elliot Lander, actually put Elmeron inside of liposomes, because that's another one of the emerging therapies, is using these little tiny round circle liposomes, which are basically little fatty spheres, and you put medicine inside the sphere, and then you put it in the bladder, and it passes through the bladder mucosal layer, delivering the medication deeper into the bladder. And so Dr. Lander did one study of Elmeron inside of a liposome but he couldn't, if I remember correctly, get the company interested in studying that further, because I did talk to him about that. Do we have any other? I don't see anything here. Hold on. Let me look at one more thing. I want to look under the scientific name rather than the brand name. Oh, here we go. No. Here we go. Oh, wow, that's old. By Dr. Davis. Okay. This is very old. 2008. Dr. Davis in Southern California studied Elmeron bladder instill intravesical Pitocin plus oral Pitocin. Yeah. Anyway, Kathleen, good. So Kathleen said the Parsons instill is heparin, Kenalog, lidocaine, gentamicin. Worked for her with a little bit of sodium bicarb. And it's the sodium bicarb, which is actually probably the most important ingredient, because that's what helps it cross the bladder lining. And that's why we always say, if you're doing home installations, you never, ever, ever, ever change the formula. Some patients think, hey, let's just do more, it'll help more. If you do more sodium bicarb, you're actually increasing the drug absorption, and you could overdose. So I always say to patients, if you're doing home instills, please follow their formula exactly. Sharon said, I believe one of the first side effects of Elmeron was hair loss. Yes, it was. Hair loss, easy bruising, digestive upset. We called it Elmeron diarrhea. So there were patients who took Elmeron, and it might be a month later, it might be 6 months later or a year later, but suddenly one day they developed this massive, terrible diarrhea. And that has now been linked with inflammatory bowel disease. And in fact, it was the Elmeron eye researchers at Emory University who found that all the patients that they were studying who had blindness also had inflammatory bowel disease, and some had to have their entire colon removed. And they were able to link that back and associate that with what they believed to be related to Pitocin. And we've long known, even from the earliest days after Elmeron was approved, and I was a support group leader back then, you know, what they used to say is, if you have a patient who has diarrhea, just tell them to take it out of the capsule. It's the capsule causing the diarrhea. But now, and I did an article on it on the IC Network website a year or two ago. You can go find it. Emory did a much better job of making that correlation with inflammatory bowel disease. And let me see. Let me see if I can. Okay. Pitocin polysulfate associated dysplasia in patients. So I did a big article on this a year and a half ago. So Emory researchers began tracking inflammatory bowel disease in the same population of patients. In May of 2023, they released their first case series of 13 patients, of whom 84% had developed symptoms suggestive of IBD or IBS after beginning Pitocin therapy. 10 patients had abnormal mucosal changes in their colon, and 6 had abnormal appearing colonic mucosa during endoscopy. And notably, after Elmiron was stopped, all of the patients had an improvement in their symptoms and the lining of their colon. So this is what's so interesting about this, is they weren't the first. And I went through the early research. So in 2005, gastroenterologists at Texas A&M published 2 case studies, which they believe showed a relationship with Pitocin and colitis. One, a 29-year-old woman developed bloody diarrhea and cramping abdominal pain 1 month after starting Pitocin. And again, Pitocin is it's the scientific name for Elmiron. Elmiron is the brand name. The scientific name is Pitocin. So in this 29-year-old woman, a sigmoidoscopy, a test that looks at the rectum and lower intestine, found small ulcers and red bleeding tissue. A colonoscopy revealed colitis extending from her rectum to her transverse colon. Biopsies confirmed active colitis. Her symptoms completely resolved when she discontinued Pitocin use. A 59-year-old female with a history of IBS developed increased diarrhea and lower left quadrant abdominal pain 2 weeks after starting Pitocin. A colonoscopy revealed ulcerations. Biopsies confirmed moderately active colitis with some fibrosis, thickening, and necrosis, tissue death. And the typical treatments for colitis were not effective. Her abdominal pain and diarrhea improved after the medication was stopped, and further testing revealed a complete resolution of her colitis. In 2015, researchers at the University of Missouri and UC Irvine published a case study of a 32-year-old female with IC who struggled with diarrhea for 7 months. She had abdominal cramping and loose bloody stools with approximately 20 bowel movements a day. They attempted treatment with several meds over a year with no improvement. However, when Elmiron was discontinued, her symptoms resolved over a few weeks. A new colonoscopy found normal tissue. They concluded, quote, Elmiron may rarely induce colitis and rectal bleeding. In 2022, researchers in Oregon searched the electronic medical records of 2 care centers to identify patients using Pitocin who also had a diagnosis of Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis. They found 30 patients who met their criteria, 10 of whom had colonic dysplasia. Dysplasia is an area of the lining of the colon where the cells become abnormal and become cancerous over time. 6 of these patients required a colectomy, meaning they removed that section, while 3 discontinued the drug and achieved healing. And then we have our research from 2023. So here's the thing. It's unclear whether Pitocin itself or a metabolite is causing both the eye and gut effects. One theory suggests it could be a chemical injury. In animal studies on inflammatory bowel disease, researchers used the drug dextran sodium sulfate to artificially induce intestinal inflammation. But Pitocin polysulfate is also a sulfated polysaccharide with a similar structure. So could this be injuring tissue over time? This must be confirmed in additional research. And we have a study on this. So this is an article over on the IC Network website, published in January 23, and I have all links to all the research studies there. So again, I'm really concerned about doctors who are still prescribing Elmiron and yet not warning patients of both of these significant side effects. Anne says, so if you have vaginal atrophy and no symptoms, do you need to use estrogen? Well, your job is to keep your skin as healthy as possible. The drier the skin, the more sensitive it becomes, the more difficult that skin, uh, uh, the more difficult it will be for that skin to heal. The skin is meant to be moist. The vagina is meant to be moist. The urethra is meant to be moist. The vulva is meant to be moist. The bladder is meant to be moist. Your mouth is meant to be moist. Meant to be moist. These are called mucosal tissues. Mucus, moisture, plays a critical role in their health. And so I've worked with some ladies who by the time they're in their 80s and their little vulvas are like dry potato chips and they're in agony. I think your goal here is to try to keep your skin as healthy as possible. And so using a little bit of estrogen just to help that skin produce mucus makes sense to me. But obviously, that's a conversation you need to have with your doctor. Kat says, "Hi, Jill. Recently diagnosed with IC after 7 years. Currently taking gabapentin, have acupuncture, massage, hypnotherapy using a TENS to manage the 24/7 band of pressure and pain across my pelvis with little to no results. My specialists are reluctant to help me further. Have you got any recommendations for pain management or treatments that can help?" So, welcome, Kat. It's very, very nice to meet you. You are not alone, my friend. You are not alone. So, a diagnosis of IC is at this point in time fairly meaningless because it doesn't tell us what's causing your symptoms. A diagnosis of the name interstitial cystitis has been thrown out in the majority of the world, and we're getting close to throwing it out here in the United States too. We just had a big editorial published in one of our big magazines saying it's time to cut the tie because interstitial cystitis really doesn't mean anything and it's a wrong term. What this is the bladder pain syndrome, for which there are many potential causes. So the way we start today is with something called phenotyping to try to figure out what your underlying cause is. There are at least 5 separate groups of patients, each with their own treatments. So we don't know what group you're in yet. And so I am happy to try to phenotype you. I do it every day, working day. I can do it right now if you're willing to ask questions, or we can even go into Zoom and do it there. Sharon says, "So just a bad drug." I would say it was once considered the gold standard treatment for IC, but no longer carried that position. Kathleen said, "I received that formula from fall 2018 through fall 2020. My bladder felt so much better. I moved to another state. Sadly, instills are not the same. Been through 2 cystos with hydro, under anesthesia with biopsies, with few okay. Your bladder feels worse than ever. Still cathing 4 times a day for residual urine, inflammation of the urethra, using estradiol twice a week, in much pain, 74 years old." Okay, so Kathleen, how old were you? Okay, guys, this could be a good time to transition into Zoom. If you want to go into Zoom, because then we can talk one-on-one and I can ask you questions and you can answer questions and I can actually phenotype you easily. So let me know if anybody wants to go into Zoom right now. I can start up the Zoom and then we can have, a direct conversation with me asking you questions and you answering the questions. So that's the only way I can phenotype. Kathleen, The fact that your inflammation is in your urethra and the fact that you're 74, that really points primarily to estrogen atrophy, genitourinary syndrome of menopause. And so, are you putting that estrogen at the entrance to your urethra? Because that's what they would normally do. That's what they had me do. So I would like to know, number one, how old were you when this all began? You're 74 now. When did this begin? And is there any event that you associate with the onset of your symptoms? Kat, that goes with you too. Is there any event that you associate with the onset of your symptoms? Because, Kat, the way you're describing a band of pressure and pain across your pelvis, that's fascinating language. Patients don't describe IC that way. Typical IC, bladder wall driven IC, presents as pain as the bladder fills with urine that is relieved by urination. So the fuller your bladder gets, the worse you feel. And once you empty your bladder, you feel better. So pain on bladder fill is the most common way that patients describe IC bladder wall pain. So I usually ask the question, when do you feel the worst? Before you pee or after you're done peeing? If you feel worse before you pee, that points me to your bladder wall. If you feel worse after you're done peeing, that points me to your pelvic floor. Now, generally, when doctors look in the bladders of most patients, they usually find normal, healthy tissue. Hunner's lesions are only found in 5 to 10% of patients. And yeah, some patients can have a red bladder because of their diet and stuff like that. But for the great majority of us, myself included, the bladder looks normal, which leaves you, the patient, going, what the hell? Oh, wait, I'm peeing all night. How can I have a healthy bladder? And Christine says here, she feels worse after she's done peeing. So pain after urination really focuses instead on the pelvic floor. But your language here, 24/7 band of pressure and pain across your pelvis. I want to talk to you about that because a couple of things come to mind. Number one, have you had a pelvic floor assessment? Do we have healthy muscle tone? Number two, do you feel like you're carrying a bowling ball in your pelvis? Is it heavy? And does the heaviness get worse as the day goes on? Because if the heaviness gets worse as the day goes on, that's pelvic congestion syndrome. And that can cause bladder symptoms. But it's actually varicose vein in your pelvis collecting muscle. So again, Kat, how old were you when your symptoms started? And is there any event that you associate with the onset of your symptoms? Had you fallen, been in a car accident, had a baby? What do you think triggered it? Yes, at the entrance, it began at 68. Okay, so Kathleen, at the entrance to the urethra, that happened to me when I was 52. And I felt like there was a drop of urine that wouldn't come out of my urethra. My urethra got very, very, very inflamed over a period of 3 to 4 months. I threw everything I knew at this symptom. Nothing worked. I was thoroughly exasperated because my urethra is very tender and annoying. I finally threw myself on the mercy of my urologist. He took one look and he goes, Jill. And I'm like, imagine, okay, I'm laying in the stirrups in the examination room. My knees are up. He's looking down there. I'm looking through him going, what? What? And he said, didn't you use the estrogen cream I prescribed for you last year? And I went, no. And he goes, why? And I said, because of my brain, I'm 25 years old and I can't possibly have an age-related issue. And then he explained to me that the urethra is the canary in the coal mine when it comes to estrogen atrophy. And it's often the first part of the urinary tract to start screaming when estrogen levels drop to a certain point. And he prescribed estrogen again and had me rub it into the entrance of my urethra. And 2 weeks later, the pain was gone. And if I forget to use it, the pain comes back. It feels warm. So anyway, so I have a really good blog on our website, on the IC Network website, icnetwork.org, called The 7 Causes of Urethral Pain. So Kathleen, I want you to go look at that, because the other thing we want to think about is you could have an infection in your periurethral gland. You could be having a dryness reaction if you're wearing pads. It could be from tight pelvic floor muscles, but most of the time it could be from laundry detergent, fabric softener, because at your age, listen, your skin is dry, and any chemicals that end up in your underwear, if you use fabric softener or if you wear a mini pad, are going to gas off and irritate your urethra. If I put on a pair of underwear washed in Tide, within 5 or 10 minutes, I'll have urethral pain. So that skin can be very vulnerable to chemical irritation. So go over to icnetwork.org and just search on the website for urethral pain. And you should find that blog. Go through it. I just updated it, as a matter of fact, Friday. Gina said, what resources do I have for PGAD? I'm doing physical therapy, internal. I have read the book, Healing Pelvic Pain. Incredible book. The other book that I would read, honey, is this one, because I think this one's even more helpful, because it talks in depth about treatment and what do we do for pudendal neuralgia. And he explains, in far more detail, the specific muscle groups, the specific nerves, and how he treated it. And so as an example, hold on a sec. Let me see if I can. Okay, that's a tailbone section. Here it is. There's a whole chapter, chapter 14. Don't ask, won't tell, PGAD. I've consistently found dysfunction in the muscles of the anterior perineal triangle, urogenital diaphragm, and pelvic floor, and frequently also pudendal nerve sensitivity in my patients with PGAD. The ischiocavernosus muscles cover the spongy tissue of the clitoris and penis and tighten with arousal. When these muscles develop trigger points and become sensitive, they can compress the underlying erectile tissue and produce a spectrum of PGAD symptoms. I'm convinced that the key to relieving these symptoms lies primarily in releasing tension, spasm in the muscles of the urogenital diaphragm. So let me read you this book is filled with case studies. Let me see. Jennifer's story. Jennifer is a 61-year-old woman who, about a year prior to her first appointment with me, had developed urinary urgency, frequency, and pain, and been told she might have IC. Physician treated her with antibiotics though her urine cultures had been negative. About 3 months after the onset of her initial symptoms, she began experiencing vulvar burning, which alternated with burning around the urethra. Then she began to have burning on the right side of her sit bone, accompanied by difficult bowel movements requiring straining. Next, urinary symptoms progressed to include hesitancy, interruption of flow, and a sensation of the urethra being squeezed. She also developed difficulty with penetration during intercourse and pain when she spread her legs apart, which took a toll on her work as a dance instructor. While taking Jennifer's history, I learned that 14 years prior to her appointment with me, she'd suffered a bone spur in her right hip socket. When I examined her, I found skin sensitivity around the right sit bone and perineum, as well as sensitivity to the Q-tip test around the vulvar vestibule, especially in the area near the opening. Internally, I noted marked tension of the pelvic floor muscles with trigger points in the urinary sphincter, right obturator internus, hip rotator, as well as an exquisitely tender right pudendal nerve. I also noticed severe bilateral Morton's toe, indicating the likely presence of biomechanical compensatory dysfunction. That's a whole nother story. It was my initial thought that the abnormal biomechanics and hip rotator trigger points could have produced the pudendal nerve sensitivity, as well as the urethral, urinary, and vulvar symptoms. Therefore, I initiated a treatment regimen of internal myofascial release and nerve mobilization therapy, supplemented with regular physical therapy and foot pads for her Morton toes, and she did trigger point injections. Though Jennifer made steady progress on this program, she nonetheless experienced periodic relapses. After 8 months, I concluded that the nerve required more aggressive approach and administered bilateral nerve blocks. Following this treatment, Jennifer proclaimed, "I feel wonderful." Now there was no further pudendal nerve sensitivity, only a few tender points in the urinary sphincter remained, and these resolved with continued myofascial relief and acupuncture. At the time of her last appointment, 18 months after her therapy began, Jennifer thanked me for giving her a really good year and asked how the book was progressing. I told her it was almost there. To my amazement, she confessed that about 6 months after her sessions with me began, she'd experienced clitoral arousal during my treatment of the muscles associated with pudendal neuralgia. While this concerned her at the time, she was too embarrassed to mention it. The arousal experience had recurred intermittently over a period of several months and then resolved with her other symptoms. In effect, my work on the trigger points in these muscles had created the primary system of PGAD, which confirmed the muscle cause of her symptoms, called rebound sensitivity. Anyway, honey, anybody with PGAD, get this book. Gina says, currently reading that. It's fantastic. I mean, it's like literally the best book ever. Kathleen said, I will apply estradiol to urethra opening each night for a week. Make sure your doctor's okay with that. I don't see why they wouldn't be okay with that, but just remember, I can't give you medical advice. You should definitely talk to your doctor about that too, okay? Donut said you'd be willing to do phenotyping on Zoom if that's what I'm offering. Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. I would be happy to do that. Let me set up Zoom right now. And then if anybody wants to come into Zoom, we will end the day in Zoom. Kathleen said, I question what is the safest toilet paper to use? What are the best wipes to use on the labia? Prior to prepping for cathing, do not use laundry softener, hypoallergenic laundry soap, and you're an asthmatic. What's the best wipes to use on your labia is water. Here, hold on. I'll get my wipes. Hold on. Okay. So, as I cared for my mother in the last years of her life, she could not wipe herself at all. I did it all for her. Not the funnest thing in the world, but you want to give your mom some grace, which is what I tried to do. And she had severe lichen sclerosis, so she was exquisitely sensitive to wipes. The one I could use with her, easy peasy, water wipes. These were fantastic. Adult care, sensitive wipes, 99.9% water. These worked beautifully, but you cannot flush them. And So hold on. What is the? I don't have my reading glasses on. I have my computer glasses on, and I don't have my reading glasses in here. Okay, so it's water with a little bit of grapefruit seed extract. Okay, this was fine, super cheap, very, very, very inexpensive, Kathleen. I mean, like $2, $2.50. Super, super cheap. So water wipes. Now I will tell you what I use for me if I have a bit of a messy poopy, as we all have done every now and then, is I use Preparation H wipes. And I love them. And they just work really well for me. I will say I try to only use one, and then I have a Perry bottle and water, and I try to rinse off any chemical residue. If you're a member of the IC network, I'd be sending you free Perry bottles, because Perry bottles are actually quite hard to find. And I just found this, and I decided to order it to try it. It's called Wipe Gel. Turn toilet paper into wet wipes. So it's a toilet paper gel with prebiotics and witch hazel. Again, kind of for the messy, poopy situation, not for urination. A truly flushable alternative to wet wipes, up to 400 wipes per bottle. Gentle, everyday cleansing that supports healthy bacteria. Soothing and cooling, fragrance-free. Stop using if a rash or irritation develop. The wipe that has gotten the most complaints here on the IC network is the what does it start with a C? Like, what do you call that wipe? It starts with a C. Very popular at grocery stores now. Okay, so so you add a drop to toilet tissue. Use the moistened toilet paper as a wet wipe. Flush safely. So it's got water and witch hazel, lactobacillus, coconut fruit extract for the microbiome, a little bit of inulin, stuff like that. Anyway, I haven't tried this yet, but I thought I'd give it a try. But the Preparation H wipes have been my go-to. I find it interesting that, and I'm sorry, I'm squirming. I'm like, my pain level's like at a 5 right now. So you just have to bear with me here. Yeah, Cottonelle wipes are just horrible for people who are sensitive. And Kathleen says she pours a whole bottle of water prior to cleaning. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, what was I going to say? I forgot what I was going to say. Let me set up Zoom. And thank you for being patient with me. I'm perfectly capable of working, but my patience level with recovering from major surgery is low. Okay, the Zoom is started. And let me get the invite. Okay, so if you're on Facebook, I'm going to give you the invite to Zoom. It's okay, Kathleen. I'm good. I'm not scared of the pain. I just still have incision. I still have a lot, like over 100, as she said, well over 100 sutures that won't dissolve for another month or two. So they just get very cranky. Ugh. Okay, so Facebook, you have the link to Zoom. YouTube, hold on. I have to mail it to myself, and then I'll, because you're on a different computer. So let me. And you guys, if you find these meetings helpful, please think about becoming a member of the IC Network. You can get our magazine, the IC Optimist. That's where I do my best work, by far, is in our magazine. Christine says, is OTC estrogen cream safe? No. No. You number one, it's probably a soy-based estrogen cream that might be from China, and you just don't know what's in it. No, you want to get a nice compounded estrogen cream. Kim says, I've been dealing with Hunner's ulcers for 5 years now. I've had them burned up 4 times, and they keep coming back. Definitely going to try that. Yeah, I would definitely try the Lactoferrin. I would also maybe get checked to see if you have an active viral infection. Okay, hold on. All right, YouTube, let me give you the link to Zoom. There you go. So if anybody wants to come into Zoom and for a little bit of small group time where you can talk to me and I can talk to you, feel free to come on in. If not, that's fine too. No sweat, my friends. No sweat. I am at the point in life where I just do not let things bother me so much anymore. Unless people copy my work, then I get bothered. Okay, well, we've been going for about 3 hours here so far. So let's do this. Last call for questions, last call for questions. But if you'd like to come into Zoom, we can have a personal chat. Come on in. I'll give it a couple minutes. And if no, there we go. Donuts come in. All right, hon, hold tight. Let's see if anybody else comes in. Otherwise, guys, thank you, thank you, thank you. Please come on over to the IC Network website. Please share it in your social networking. Talk about IC Awareness Month. Here comes Nancy. Because if not you, then who? All of our voices matter, my friends. All of our voices matter. All right, so I'm not seeing any more questions on YouTube, so I'm going to say goodbye to YouTube. See you later. I'll see you next week. Knock on wood. No catastrophic thoughts coming from me. Easier said.